Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Hard Truth. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you're having an awesome Sabbath as I am. And I just thank you so much for tuning in. I want to talk to you about the 10 biggest mistakes that the prosecution has made in this Idaho 4 case. And these mistakes may cost them the trial, okay? May cost them the case. I want to know what you think about these 10 biggest mistakes that the prosecution has made in the Idaho 4 case. All right, it's time to make some coffee, brew a nice cup of tea as we begin our story. Number one, Dylan Mortensen's timeline of 4 a.m. to 4:17 a.m. According to the PCA, this only leaves the killer about 8 or 9 minutes to commit the crime. I've heard other estimations, but according to the PCA, the crime couldn't have started before 4:07 or 4:08, and it couldn't have gone past 4:17, according to Dylan's statement. Okay, and so it's going to be hard for a jury to believe that one person killed four people in a split level home in 8 or 9 minutes, okay, with a knife or some type of sharp edged weapon. All right, it's going to, unless Brian Kohlberger names the co-conspirator and places himself in their house, the jury is going to be forced to believe that one person did this in 8 or 9 minutes. And that's a tough one, even for the most, broad thinking person. All right. Number two, the Wadi Lantra. The prosecution is insisting that Brian Kohlberger's car is one of the biggest pieces of their evidence. All right. And so if Brian Kohlberger's car or Wadi Lantra has to be the getaway car, then there needs to be blood in his car, and they did not find any. Okay, they're insisting that he drove away from the house immediately after the crime, and so there should be some evidence of his blood, the victim's blood, the dog hair. There should be something in his car, and there isn't. All right. And what if the killers walked to the house? All right. What if BK parked somewhere if he did it and walked to the home and it's not his car on the video footage? Then what? I mean, they're backed into a corner. Another thing I noticed is that Brian Kohlberger can't drive. The only insight we have into his life is traffic stops. All of the footage we have of Brian Kohlberger live is him being pulled over by traffic police. So he's not the greatest driver. We saw that in Washington when he drove into the crosswalk. Okay, I don't know what he got stopped for in Moscow, but it was traffic violation. And then there was another stops for driving too closely in Indiana. So he's not the best driver. All right, if Mr. Kohlberger had to come and rode with him from Washington to Pennsylvania, he probably would have come home with a pocket full of traffic tickets because he's not the best driver. And so think about him driving from Moscow to Blaine to Genesee to Uniontown. If you look on Google Maps, those roads are pretty dark with not a lot of lighting. So to be driving through there in the dark in the wee hours of the morning, I would expect Brian Kohlberger to get pulled over like he usually does, and he didn't. Some of you may say, well, he drove down to the Albertsons and the cup of coffee place and he didn't get pulled over and he made it back home. Well, that was during the daytime. I'm talking about at night on roads with no lighting after you just killed four people and there's state police out there. And if you drove through the cities, the local police, I would expect him to make a mistake driving, which he usually does. Okay, the next problem is the stalking claim. For months, we heard about him obsessing over these girls. First of all, if he was stalking anybody in Moscow, we should have some footage of Brian Koberger on film on that campus in those neighborhoods on a Ring camera. I'm not talking about a car. I'm talking about him. We should have him on camera somewhere in Moscow, Idaho, between June and December. And we don't. I'm not talking about snapshots of his car that may have been on King Road. I'm talking about Brian Koberger in the flesh on film. Another thing that we should have that we don't is some association between him and some of the girls in that house, at least one of them, and we don't. We've heard from two places that there's no connection. The families of the victims, Mr. G said there was no connection, and Ann Taylor, after reviewing the evidence, said there's no connection. Another thing I want to point out about the stalking claim is that Brian was a teaching assistant in Washington. He had students, female students, the same age as the Idaho 4 girls. And we have them all complaining about him. Okay? So if he wasn't cited for predatory behavior with these girls in the classes in Washington or trying to get with one of those girls, what I'm trying to say is, if he didn't want the young girls in his own classroom on his own campus, what would he want with the young girls over there on King Road? Number 4, the November 25th WSU police claim. All right, according to the PCA, Brian's car was identified or turned in by the WSU police on November the 25th. So at that time, they had his car, they had the knife sheath with DNA on it, they had Dylan's statement, they had Dylan's ID of the witness as having bushy eyebrows, and if they researched him like they claimed, they would know that they already had his phone number on file from a previous traffic stop. So what would have stopped them from arresting him or bringing him in for interrogation or trying to get his DNA off a coffee cup on November 26th? November 25th. And even on the 30th when Papa Rogers came out looking just like him. What was to stop them from interrogating him or pulling his DNA, on the down low or something? It just doesn't add up that they had him as a suspect on November the 25th. It just, when they had the wrong year of the car, okay, it just doesn't add up. The November 25th claim doesn't match what they told us in subsequent filings because they're saying they didn't come up with his name until the FBI gave his DNA. So which was it, November 25th or was it December the 19th? The WSU police claim could end up hurting the prosecution in the long run because it contradicts the most recent accounts that they've given. All right? What do you think about this one? Okay, number 5 is failure to release and explain the 911 call. Once everybody found out that Dylan and Bethany were in the house during the crimes, or so they say, all right, everyone was skeptical, angry, confused, accusing, and explaining the 911 call, releasing it, and letting us hear it would have put the public at ease and given us some sense of trust in the police that what they're telling us is the truth. But by hiding the identity of the 911 caller and not letting us hear exactly what was said, gives the impression that they have something to hide about what happened after the murders between the time that the kids were unalived and the time the police were called. All right? And so that ambiguity will not help the prosecution during the trial. Now, this is 1 through 5 of my list of the 10 biggest mistakes. Let me know what you think about these. We'll talk about it, and I will post 6 through 10 in a part 2 of this series. All right? Thank you so much for watching.